Welcome to the Changing the Perception of Sales podcast. And today I'm very pleased to say we are joined by Brett James. Brett, great to have you.
Yes, excited to be here, Kyle. I've watched quite a few episodes over the last couple of years. So looking forward to finally being on here, and hopefully I can give some valuable contribution.
I'm sure you can. Well, it's been a long time coming, so very, very excited to get into the conversation today. And as we always like to start and kick things off then, for those that don't know who you are, please give us a bit of an insight into who Brett James is and what it is that you do.
Yeah, so I'm VP of Sales at Leadoo and Sales Manago. It's a dual role, if you like, across the SMB team. So looking after two managers, and I think it is around 16 A's now. So yeah, my role's just recently broadened out to that because Sales Manago have just acquired Leadoo. So exciting times from that perspective. And yeah, from Yorkshire, Wakefield originally in Yorkshire. I've got a wife, I've got a young son, I've got another son on the way in the next 3 months. So yeah, family man and a sales guy as well. So playing two different roles there.
Brilliant. Love it. Which role's the most important one? It's got to be the family one, surely.
Family first, always. Yeah. Maybe a few years ago when I was learning my trade still, I was very, maybe too much work driven, but now you've got to play a different role, Carl, when you've got a family.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Congrats. I didn't know you had another kid on the way as well, so massive congrats. But to get into it then, we always like to start at the beginning and kind of your introduction into sales, given that we're looking to change the perception of the industry. There's still far too many people out there that will never even consider going into sales in the first place, and a lot of people just happen to fall into it. So, how and where were you introduced to the wonderful world of sales?
Yeah, I probably fell into it a little bit as well, Carl, to be honest. So I went to university in Sheffield, and then I was lucky to get my first job in my hometown city of Wakefield, in a small marketing agency called DPP, which were basically specialised in the automotive industry. So delivered all kinds of different marketing services, if you like, to that specific industry. I was there around 5-6 years, I believe. Had an unbelievable time. Some great people there, some great leaders. And I started off as account managing in terms of actually handling the clients and making sure that they were looked after. But then it became apparent that I actually got the appetite to win new business. And I think that came about from the CEO setting a challenge for anybody to sell we used to call them e-shots then. So it was like, can you sell a new email to a new client and you'll get a bonus. And I wasn't actually there to win new business, but I went for it. I did it, and then from there it catapulted. Really, I took it upon myself to start going out and trying to win new business, and I quickly found out I was pretty good at it. So you could say I fell into it from there, and then from there it was all about new business, and it has been ever since.
Love it. I always like to ask as well if people can remember their first ever sale and how it felt. But it sounds like your first sale might have been that e-shot campaign when it wasn't actually part of your role.
My first sale was that. Yeah, it was, and the company was a company called Play Away Abroad, which is sort of an 18 to 30s company. I think they're still going, and they basically help people 18 to 30s to get jobs abroad in your resorts that are party resorts, let's say, and they became a client from there. So yeah, I remember my first new business sale very, very well, and that was it.
Nice. Play away abroad. Wow.
Exactly.
And what do you think it was then for you? It sounds like you weren't necessarily destined for sales. So what do you think it was that made you and the CEO set that competition that made you want to really get involved and make sure that you won it?
I mean, thinking back to it, I was a very competitive person anyway. I think it was probably that competitiveness in me, to be honest. Kyle played a lot of sport over the years and been competitive along the way. And I just think if I think back to it, I just wanted to prove to people that actually it's not only the people that are designated that can get new business. Why can't I as well? So I took it upon myself. I didn't have to sort of enter the competition because I was an account manager, but I did. And yeah, I was the first one to sell it. And then I think there was a few more competitions after that, and I did pretty well. And then from there, I didn't really ask my then manager if I could continue to try and win new business. But then it moved on to winning new clients. In those days, it was motor groups. So winning new motor groups across the country. And basically being their dedicated marketing agency moving forward. And I was very successful in that towards the latter stages of my time there, which then led me nicely to my next role. So, yeah, worked out really well. It was just, I think it was a competitive streak in me that just drove me on to do it. And then I loved it. From the minute I did it, I loved it. So I wanted to continue it.
Brilliant. At what point would you say, 'cause you could have carried on doing the marketing role, there's probably people in marketing now that might resonate with what you've just said. At what point did you decide, actually, I'm going to make the transition from what I've been doing as an account manager in a marketing role to actually, take the sales part of my career seriously and fully pursue that?
Yeah, I think I went on to another role after DPP. I actually left for one of their biggest competitors, actually. That didn't go down too well after spending quite a lot of time at DPP and learning my trade there. But I made that jump. I made that decision because I felt it was a progression, and that was when it sort of the business development, the sales side of me really started to develop, because that was basically a pure business development role there. So I went there. I sat down on the desk. I was given some car keys. Literally, this is what happened. I was given some car keys, no existing accounts or anything to look after. I was given the car keys. I had a BMW in the car park, which was great because I was still pretty young. And, I thought, wow, they're believing me here. They're giving me this unbelievable car. But that was it. I was literally tasked with going out and getting on the road, which I'd done quite a lot of DPP in the latter end anyway. I was driving across the country to win new business. And that was the old school way then, Kyle. It wasn't, obviously it was picking up the phone and things like that, but the old school way was literally knocking on doors, and that's what I used to do. And then that carried on in the same vein at Rhino, which was the company that I left to. Literally got in that car. I think in the first year, I drove 50,000 miles, probably visited nearly every service station in the country, trying to win new motor groups as business, and I was successful in that time. So, and it just gave me the hunger and drive to be better than everybody else, and to go the extra mile, given the fact that I was driving all those miles and things like that. It really spurred me on to make sure I was the top of the pile and progress as fast as I can, if that makes sense.
Nice, love it. So it sounds like way before the time of sequences and cadences and multi-threading and everything we have at our disposal now. Before we just go into that in a bit more detail, I'm not sure if you're a Gavin and Stacey fan, but I know they have a little bit of a running joke around service stations.
Someone once told me I was on holiday a couple of years ago. I think I was on a stag do, and someone came up to me and said, "Are you Gavin from Gavin and Stacey?" really, I was like, I had to Google him because I don't really watch it. I was like, wow, thanks.
I can kind of, you know what? In the shape of the face, potentially, I can see it. Maybe.
I think so. I'm hoping it's more the sort of personality and sort of comedy value that they get from him, rather than maybe the overall character, perhaps. But I did. It made me laugh. I don't really watch it that much. I've watched it a few times, but yeah, I know.
Well, what was the best service station you found yourself in those 50,000 miles?
There's one in Gloucester that's it's one of sort of these modern ones that it's like there's like a farm shop in there, and I think it's pretty well known now, actually. I think there's a little bit of a lake next to it. There's a farm shop in there. It's has a very sort of agricultural feel to it, if you like, given the surrounding area. So I can't remember the name of it. You might be researching it now, but it's a nice one. That's probably the best one. Some of them are awful.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely some bad ones. I think it's just called Gloucester Services Farm Shop and Kitchen, but sounds.
There we go. That's the one. Sounds about right.
Well, if you're in field sales and about the southwest Gloucester area, get yourself to the farm shop. But it's interesting to look at maybe how sales has changed as an industry, but also as far as your career's gone, because we'll go into kind of SaaS and tech sales in a second. But I'm just interested. So you would literally drive up and down the country, all over the place, turning up. What would that initial interaction look like when you're kind of turning up there out of the blue?
Yeah, I mean, I turned up at quite a few, but I also set up. There was occasions, obviously, where I set up meetings before I got there. I usually did it, Kyle. So I would book a meeting at a motor group. I'd then research the 5 or 6 within that sort of, I don't know, 20 mile, 30 mile radius, and I would be literally going door to door, seeing if I could get a quick 5 to 10 minutes with either the sales manager there, the sort of marketing, some of the marketing team if they were based at that particular dealership, and the interaction would be, I literally had a book, if you like, of different campaigns that we were running for different dealerships, the results that we've got. So case study led really, and just basically saying, look, would you like to do a similar thing? So yeah, it was all dependent on if I could get to 5 to 10 minutes time, and in this sort of modern sales world, that would look like getting in with a stakeholder that's perhaps not the key one, or the EB, if you like, in this case, and then getting them to talk about me to the rest of the stakeholders that it would matter to. But it just taught me a lot about sales and building relationships. Yeah, I loved it. I loved every minute of it, to be honest. It was just great grounding for me, and it has been ever since. Because it takes I would say, Carl, it takes a certain someone to do that, if I'm honest with you. So, yeah, but it was great for me. Great learning experience.
Yeah, I bet. I think like the skills you probably learned doing that probably still help you, and have helped you get to where you are today. And coming onto that then, how did you then, like, talk us through the transition from what you were doing, driving up and down the country, visiting dealerships, to then the transition into, I guess, a tech sales or a SaaS environment?
Yeah, it's been a funny old journey, to be honest. So at Rhino, on the same day I started, um, I can't remember what title they gave him, to be honest, back then. But another chap called Mark Gilbert joined on the same day, and little did I know, on that day, that Mark would continue to be a huge influence on my career, and still is to this day. Is a mentor to me. He started on the same day, and we had a great relationship. And he opened my eyes with some of the things he was looking to bring into Rhino, in terms of like expanding our services and expanding our portfolio, if you like, in terms of what we could offer to motor groups. One of those things was technology. So Rhino back then were looking to maybe become a reseller of different MarTech to the automotive space. So that opened my eyes to technology, because it hadn't opened my eyes to it before. And because of that, it had a bit of an opposite effect, probably, that maybe Mark and Rhino would have liked, because I, along with the business, one of the guys that worked there that I actually worked with at DPP as well, Graham, we got talking and sort of thought to ourselves, there's a huge gap in the market here from an automotive perspective, especially from a marketing automation standpoint, that not many motor groups are really understanding and using of it, but it's something we could take to that sector and sell. So we quickly got together and decided that, hey, why don't we set up on our own? So we set up a business called Peppy Marketing, left Rhino, and the whole objective and mission for Peppy was to partner with what would be the next role of mine with Force 24. We would partner with them and would resell their software to the automotive industry. We did it, was a great success, and we also actually ended up selling it to different industries in that 6 to 8 month period, I think it was. And then, as what comes probably next in this conversation, Force 24 acquired us, and I then went to work for Force 24, and then my tech sales journey really started to begin. So I didn't take a normal route, to be honest, Carlo. I went on my own early in terms of starting my own business. Wouldn't do it again. It was extremely scary from start to finish, but I would say luckily, but maybe luck's not the word. Because you've got to make your own luck. Like we did well, it worked out, and that's why I'm where. It's a big reason as to why I'm where I am today. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. The one thing I want to tap into what you just said there, because we have people on the podcast that have started their own business, and a lot of the advice you see on LinkedIn is, just do it, just do it. Yeah, if you've got this dream, just give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? As someone that has done it, it's quite interesting for you to say that you wouldn't do it again. So I think it's good to be really honest around actually the other side that you maybe don't see, this maybe glamorizes much. So why wouldn't you do it again?
I don't think I realised um, just all of the different hats you needed to wear. I was great at sales, and Graham was a really really great sort of from a CS perspective. I was getting the obviously winning the new clients, and then Graham was the sort of person that was looking after them, making sure that we were delivering what we'd said alongside the Force 24 extended team, if you like, back then. Um, but then you've got to wear all sorts of other hats, Kyle. Like you've got to be the finance guy who's chasing invoices. You've got to ensure that you can meet the client's expectations and also meet what you've sold to them. Um, there's just different hats, and then you've got to forecast accurately. You've got to add in predictability on what you can forecast and the revenue you can make for the next 3 to 6 months, which isn't easy. And also, there's just all sorts of different expenses that come about that you'd never thought about and you never put in your spreadsheet, if you like. And that's why I was super lucky. We were super lucky to have Howard, my father-in-law, who was an accountant, didn't charge us a thing, and was there every step of the way to guide us on making sure that we one could stay afloat, and two, we didn't go off spending money that we didn't have. And I mean, a great example just that you might find funny is when we sort of come up with the idea and pitched it to Howard, the accountant. He was on board with it, but I also put in my budget that we wanted 2 new cars, we wanted to lease 2 new cars, and we were going to get an office in Leeds, I think it was, or Wakefield, I can't remember where it was. And he just curtailed that straight away and said, absolutely not, you don't need to do that. Expenses you don't need. You need laptops, and that was it really. And obviously we could use, I think we got cars on short-term, month-to-month leases, which helped us as well. So yeah, get a good accountant. Big advice for anyone.
Get a good accountant. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Just maybe open your eyes a little bit more to exactly what you're getting yourself into if anyone is thinking about doing it. But it's really interesting to hear you say that. Going into kind of tech, then you mentioned your pathway probably wasn't the more typical one where people come in and SDR, maybe senior SDR, AE, and so on and so forth from there. So I'm interested to learn a little bit more around that journey for you from kind of joining or being acquired by Force 24, and specifically more so that transition you made into management and leadership in that time.
Yeah, so then I joined Force 24, which was which was amazing actually. In certain areas, especially the start. So I joined as an individual contributor when they purchased Pepe. Graham went into the CS team, and I joined as an individual contributor. Killed it in the first year and a half, 2 years, I think it was. If I'm being bluntly honest, I think I was definitely top performer. The difference between myself and the others as well, Kyle, who were in the team as well, is I didn't really rely on any inbound leads. I was a pure hunter, something I've always been great at, and yeah, that served me well, I think, because I wasn't afraid of getting in the car. I was used to that, so even at Force 24, I was getting out into the car and visiting new clients and prospective new clients. But also, I was just a real hunter and made sure that I generated my own leads and took ownership in that and made sure I was in tune with what I needed to deliver, and I was delivering consistent numbers. And I think I can't remember what it was, maybe in the first 18 months, I think I billed about 500,000, maybe more, and that was purely outbound. And that continued then into the next year when I actually then became a player coach for the existing team. that was there, which was really, really great experience. I guess what usually happens is let's take the top performer and let's put him into a bit of a leadership role as well. So I did that, but I learned a lot. I also helped the sales team there in terms of developing them a little bit, showing the way that I do things, which I think helped them. Hopefully they would agree. And that led us to the Series A, which was the next chapter. We had a great year as when I was player coach, but we hadn't had investment by then. But our performance definitely contributed to then getting Series A investment, which was a whole new beast in itself, Kyle, which I'm sure you're going to ask me about. But that was my initial early stage journey at Force 24, which I absolutely loved. So holds a special place in my heart to this day. We had some great times, great people, great team, and always great as well, I would say, in helping a Yorkshire business close to your roots be successful and make waves in the tech space, which we did. It was great.
Amazing. Yeah, certainly one of the success stories coming out of Yorkshire as well. And you are absolutely right. I would like to ask around the Series A. But before I do that, I actually want to ask a little bit more around what you said with kind of the outbound strategy.
Yeah.
A couple of points, really. So first of all, you said you generated 500,000 in revenue in that first year from outbound. What was the strategy or kind of some of the tactics that you utilized to do that you then passed on to the team when you went into that leadership role?
Yeah, you might think this is crazy what I'm about to say, but I was actually conducting sequences without having the software. So we didn't have back then. There wasn't a sales loft and outreach. I don't know if I could plug brands on here, but I just did. Maybe edit that out. We did eventually get sales loft post Series A, but before then, when I was just outbounding, I was calling. I was heavy on LinkedIn. And you might find this bizarre, and the CEO back then actually told me off for this, but I actually purchased my own cold email software called Woodpecker out of my own money. Wasn't through the business, out of my own account to help me drive new business meetings through cold email whilst I was out on the road. So I was setting up sequences in that cold email software as well to different data segments that was helping me to get responses saying, yeah, I'd love a call, let's have a meeting. And then coupled with that, I was obviously really heavy on LinkedIn, which was coming to the fore back then, 5-6 years ago. And obviously calling whenever I could as well. I was getting the calls in. But there were more warm calls, Kyle, because I'd nurtured prospects on those email sequences and LinkedIn, connecting the two. So when I was reaching out, they might not have sort of said we want a meeting yet, but I had top 20, top 30 that had engaged with some emails, had a bit of a lead score, for example, and then I was reaching out to them. So it worked for me. Obviously, given Force 24 was a marketing automation provider, CEO was like, why have you bought your own email software? But yeah, it was just easier to do it that way. So that's why I did it. It just helped me to book those meetings. So it was transformational for sure.
Brilliant.
Good decision on my part, if I may say so.
Absolutely. So you mentioned then it was really interesting, basically utilizing a piece of software that could do a lot of the outbound activity whilst you were out on the road, going to these clients, going to these events, which makes sense. Really clever thing to do. Going into kind of what you said as well is that it was all outbound. Everything that you were doing was purely outbound. And there'll be a lot of people maybe listening or watching this episode, might be AEs that are thinking, why should I do outbound? I've got SDRs that are feeding me leads. I've got meetings coming into my diary. And there might also be sales leaders listening to this that maybe want their AEs to do more outbound, but are maybe struggling to drive that behavior change. So I'd be keen to get your thoughts on that from your own personal experience at Force 24, from being an individual contributor doing outbound, but also from kind of what you've been doing more recently.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally different these days, Kyle, in terms of, I think a lot of AEs up and down the country are blessed with, or even in some cases inundated with different outbound from different channels, SDRs, marketing, partnerships. And it was a bit different for us back then at Force 24. We were a brand basically a startup back then trying to make waves. So as you'll know, inbound and it's harder to come by, and SDRs booking meetings is harder as well. You've got to get out. We had to get out and do outbound. And I think these days, it's in my view, Kyle, the best salespeople out there, even if they're getting inbound from different channels, are also doing some outbound. They're making time for it. They're doing it because they probably know it will either help them to make the target that they've got in front of them or even surpass it. Who wouldn't want to do that? So I often say this to my team, that the salespeople that are separating themselves from the rest are the ones out there hunting and getting their own outbound, doing their own outbound. So I'm a massive advocate of it. Push it with my own team a lot, and it's just huge, and it will help them to learn as well in terms of how to sort of build out pipeline for yourselves when times might get tough as well. So if you're already doing it and maybe there's a trough from inbound, then you'll be fine because you're already in the game of doing outbound and you know how to go about it. So massive advocate of it. Would recommend any salesperson out there do it, and any sales leader push it as well with their sales teams.
To maybe put you on the spot a little bit because I absolutely agree with you, but I think the big challenge a lot of sales leaders might be thinking of or facing is that behavior change. They may have inherited a team of AEs that have always relied on inbound. What advice would you maybe give to them just to try and change that behavior?
I think it's twofold really. One's a mentality thing, so I think it's obviously getting into the mentality that this is the difference it can make for me. Why wouldn't I do it? So I think that mentality shift is really important, Kyle. But I also think it's from a practical perspective as well, is getting it blocked out in your calendar. It can be as simple as that, and it probably is as simple as that. Blocking time out in your calendar to do it. Maybe it's on a daily basis, a bi-daily basis, whatever you can fit in to ensure that you get your head into the game when that time comes round and actually go through with it and do it. I think that's a big. That would help SDRs, AEs, obviously, to do it, and I think a big reason is because if they don't block out that time, they just won't do it. As much as they say that's their intention, they will do it this week. Is often something that every sales leader must get. Often is the case because of them being busy with other things and getting distracted, sidetracked. It isn't done. So block it out in your calendars. Get it done, even if it's an hour a day. It will make a difference. You will get results from it. So that would be how I would answer that one.
Brilliant. And moving on then to, you mentioned around the kind of investment that you got, which kind of changed probably everything with regards to the sales team at Force 24 at the time. So what was it like as someone in that senior going on to leadership position, just the environment and what it was like receiving that investment and maybe the different pressures that you probably had at the time?
I mean, first of all, when we received the Series A, it was a huge buzz. It was an achievement. We got Series A from YFM. YFM were really great, by the way. Yorkshire fund managers. So they were great investors. A Yorkshire investment fund to obviously invest in the Yorkshire business is a great story in itself. But I just feel, Kyle, we probably. As is often the case, we probably declared that we could perform to a level that actually maybe at the very start we weren't ready for yet. And suddenly overnight, once we got that investment, we had to scale the sales team. We had to, I think it was triple it. So we had one SDR at that point. We had to suddenly hire another 9 plus a manager. As soon as this investment dropped, because we had a model saying to us, look, if you want to hit these numbers that we've obviously sort of promised, then we need to start building out this team as quickly as we can. And then I think we also had to hire, I think it was 5 or 6 AEs in addition to what we'd got, plus a couple of product experts, I think, back then. So suddenly we went from a sales team of 5, I think it was back then, to sort of 18 to 20 in the end. And I was suddenly frustrated with this responsibility. of hiring this entire function, and not only hiring them, training and onboarding them. It was chaos. So we got the investment, I think, in November, December of the year before, and then we'd scaled the team by mid-January, something like that, and it was a whirlwind. Obviously, I didn't really know it back then, Carl, because I was still starting out in sales leadership anyway. But it was a total baptism of fire. It was the amount I learned was unbelievable, but the pressure, the stress that hit me by the end of that Q1, because we weren't sort of hitting the numbers, but it was a totally new team that was having to be ramped, started to take its toll. It was tough, and there was all sorts of new faces in terms of leadership coming into the business as well. So it was a lot to navigate, and some things just didn't go well. We invested a lot in sales marketing, and the numbers were not being delivered. And yeah, it spiraled from there really, both from a business perspective at times, but also more so from my perspective, and ending in the question, do I even want to do sales leadership anymore? That's what it got to be honest.
Wow. I want to come on to that last bit in a second, actually, because obviously a few years on, you are thankfully still in sales leadership. But I think it's a really raw and honest account of maybe how you were feeling at the time. But yeah, baptism of fire. I can imagine it's probably a lot of just figuring things out, really, as you're going along. Let's say now you speak to another sales leader, another salesperson that has just received Series A, and you're there to give them advice to learn from the mistakes that you made, so they get it right, or not as many things go wrong. What advice would you give them?
Get a great mentor. Get great people around you, not just that are in the business but outside of it, that have been there and done it. I was lucky to have Mark back then, but I don't think I lent on him that much at that period of time. I think he was pretty much because he was still in a role himself. So he didn't really have the time. So I felt alone a lot, Kyle. So I think getting a great mentor around you, or mentors, to guide you down that path, especially if you're starting out in sales leadership. Looking back now, if I'd have had that, it could have been different. Because don't forget as well that the leadership that we had in Force 24 at that time also hadn't gone through Series A investment before. So it was a new thing for all of us. And suddenly going from an organically growing business and self-funding themselves, which really reduces pressure, of course, because you're setting your own targets, things like that, and you're not pushing yourselves to the brink. But once investment fund comes in, it's a total different story. So that would be a big piece of advice to me, for anybody out there that might be going through this or about to go through it. Get good people around you to guide you, because it's not easy doing it by yourself, and because you're having to learn on the spot as well, Kyle. I was doing a lot of work on the spot and in trying to learn different things across the breadth of sales, if you like, and sales leadership, to try and move the needle and get results coming in that we want. But it's a hard task when you're trying to do it on your own, and that told in the end, to be honest. It really did.
Well, you were quite honest about a minute ago, saying you were kind of really unsure whether or not sales leadership was actually something you wanted to continue with. And again, I appreciate the honesty and how candid you were in saying it's quite lonely at times, which I think is not new. We've heard that before, that people get into kind of management and leadership positions. What do you think it was that was making you feel like that at the time? And then ultimately, kind of a second part to the question, what was it that made you still continue in sales leadership?
Yeah, the first one, is probably two answers there. One was I wasn't getting the results. So often when you don't get the results, you start to doubt yourself. You start to think, am I right for this sort of role? I think that's natural, and I did. Was continually asking myself, am I good enough to do this? Am I good enough to lead the team through this? Am I good enough for the company to try and get us to these results? And then the second one was, it was turning me into a leader that was not good for anybody. By that, I mean I was a very much a micromanager. I was a manager telling people and ordering people to do things to try and get a result. I know now that's not the way to do it. Probably chat about that later. But that was also putting a lot of pressure on different people, sending them to the brink as well, and I quickly, I mean, I was told on a couple of occasions, to be honest, that, you can't do it that way. That's not the way to be as a manager. Um, Losing patience, putting your stress and your pressure that's going onto your shoulders directly onto them isn't good or healthy for anybody. So that made me again think, well, if I can't stop that at my shoulders and I'm putting it onto other people and I'm not correcting my ways, which I wasn't at that time, Kyle, I'll be honest, then, maybe it's not for me. Maybe I'm just not that guy, and I'd be better to be an individual contributor and go back to that. I mean, at times I think I was close to agreeing that with Force 24, maybe going back to selling. I don't think it materialised for a couple of reasons back then. Can't remember them, but yeah. So, and then moving on to your next question, why I didn't. I think I reflected really well after my time at Force 24 and during it towards the end. And it was upon that reflection and reflecting like I did made me think about my next move. And my next move was, well, there's three things I could have done, Kyle. Go back to individual contributor and go back selling. Next one was try and go for another VP of sales role or sales director role and keep trying to rise. Or the third option was kind of take a sideward step and go into a role to learn more, learn again, and do it differently this time. Luckily, I chose the third, and I joined Leadoo to be country lead, and that was a perfect sideward step because it was a smaller team, it was growing out the UK market, and I could take everything I learned at Force 24 and apply it in a different way at Leadoo, and that's exactly what I did, and I would say it's been the best move I've ever made. So, yeah, hopefully that gives you the answer you're looking for.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Good for you that you did choose kind of avenue number three. And again, I really appreciate the honesty because I think it's very easy in these conversations just to talk about how amazing things are, how easy it is, whatever it may be. And actually, you've kind of been really open there in saying you were a top performer, 500,000 a year, absolutely smashing it, to very quickly being in a place where you felt alone, probably not getting the results you wanted, and really questioning whether it was for you. And I think that is the reality. That's not a unique scenario. It's probably what a lot of people go through. So I'm sure people listening to this will definitely appreciate hearing about your journey then, which brings us on to Leadoo then. So yeah, talk us through kind of the last few years because things seem to have moved quite quickly and a lot has happened in that time as well.
Being hands down the best experience of my career. Honestly, speaking from the heart, absolutely loved every second of it. The owners of the business, the founders, brilliant people based out of Finland, and they've just instilled an unbelievable culture in a remote first company that's just brought some of the best memories I'll probably ever have in my working career. It's been a fantastic journey from start to finish. I'm so happy I made the move. I was really successful in the beginning alongside the UK team. It was very much a collective effort in driving huge success in that market. So we took the market from, pretty much sort of zero ARR at the time to now we're touching 2.2 million ARR. So UK is really thriving now, and then obviously from there, Kyle, my role has expanded in the last 18 months to VP of Sales across all markets that we look after, Finland, Sweden, and UK. And then most recently, obviously, my role's expanded again with the Sales Manago acquisition. But yeah, Leadoo, it's just been awesome, Kyle. It's just a great product. With and a business full of great people from different backgrounds, ethnicities. Sorry, I can't say that word very well. Different background, cultures, and that's contributed to a real unique culture. That when everybody's together, it's just a great vibe, and everyone's working towards the same goal. So, yeah, loved every minute of it, and long may it continue.
Brilliant. No, look, I can certainly hear the passion coming across as well. And on the couple of bits you mentioned there, the remote first piece, I don't really want to get into, hybrid, remote, in office. I think that debate has been done, and put it this way, they can all work. And some people want remote, some don't. That's absolutely fine. The bit I'm actually interested in is more for you personally, because you're someone that has gone from everything's been in person, all client meetings at the beginning of your career, to now the complete polar opposite. So I'm just more
Yeah.
interested, rather than the whole work from home debate, just your own personal experience of going from one extreme to the other and how that's been for you.
Yeah, for me personally, I mean, I would say in the main, Kyle, it's been great. From a personal perspective, I had my we had our son 2.5 years ago, and the fact that I've been remote first, I've been able to see him grow up in the main, which has been amazing. Haven't been sat in traffic in the car for hours, not being able to put him to bed on a night, etc. So, from a personal perspective, things like that have been amazing. I think the key balance is, if you are remote first, or if you do allow remote work, is to make sure that there's a really good balance between face to face time and remote first, even if you are remote. I guess that goes without saying, but in the Leadoo UK team, we don't have an office in the UK. The other countries do. So it was really important from the start that we got a lot of FaceTime together during the sort of different events we go to, but also doing quite a lot of off-sites, doing some workspace time, things like that. So across the year, we still made sure that there was that FaceTime, because you need it, for people to thrive and keep engagement high, keep the pump high, if you like, as well, towards those targets, especially in the from a sales perspective. So we managed to do that. And yeah, you've just got to make sure that there's a fine balance, Carl. I understand what you're saying. Sales teams and in that environment, a lot would say they maybe need to be in the office every day. It hasn't been the case for us. We've still been super successful without that. So I think it can be done, but there's definitely got to be a balance between face-to-face time and remote working. And and from a personal perspective, it's been great for me, but I can't say I can't not say that there's times where, when there's quite a lag between the next event or something, it does start to get tough. So I would recommend anyone that get to a coffee shop for half a day or a day to break it up, even if they're just working by themselves. That works for me. Just to different environments, sparks new things, and feel like you're sort of getting out of the house, which is important.
Yeah. I think it's 'cause I think the debate, everyone says now, what's better? There's no right or wrong. Different things work for different people. I think if you get the processes, the culture, the blend of face to face, right, any environment can work. It's more around the leadership and everything else you've got in place as to whether or not it's in person or remote. And you're probably, proof of that really, because you've worked in both environments. We're not going to get into all of the answer to this in the next 10, 15 minutes for sure, but I'm just interested. You joined as UK country leader with zero ARR, pretty much, might have been a couple of customers. Fast forward now to 2.2 ARR. How did you initiate that process from literally a standing start? What were some of the things you looked at that have meant you've got to that 2.2 million now?
Yeah, it was probably a few more customers than that, to be fair, just to sort of clarify that, Cal. But yeah, there was multiple things we did. First, when I first came through the door, I built out an entirely new sales process. We redefined the ICP, and the third thing that I did was I sort of embedded a coaching culture. So I was very much coach first leader, and I sort of started to, and that was a real big change from Force 24 as well. So I started to coach the teams to develop them, the individuals in the team, and that really helped to uplift performance. It really did. It was a game changer there, Carl. So that really helped us. And then moving forward, we had it. I was lucky as well that I came into some great AEs. That helped us because we could propel quicker, and we did. And from there, it's there's been a couple of chapters in the Leadoo UK team. For example, last year we lost all three of those original AEs actually that I walked into when I walked in 2 years ago. So there's been a bit of a rebuilding process there now, and we've got a great team again, chapter 2 if you like. So Yeah, but those were the initial things that really helped Kyle to spark improvement. And from there, coupled with a great CS team, and also about 12 months into it, we hired an unbelievable head of marketing, Greg, who I work very closely alongside with now, still to this day, not only at Leadoo but Sales Manago, who also helped us transform our revenue. So that was really important as well, that we got a great head of marketing who'd been in and around the UK, knew the market, and then could help work alongside me to drive the results. And we have, it's been a great story so far, to be honest.
It's really interesting. You said coaching is one of the many things is what you actually looked at the beginning. Yeah, ICP process, but coaching was probably not something I was really expecting at that point. And it kind of ties quite nicely into a couple of the things you said around leadership, because you said at the end of your time at Force, you were, really questioning whether it was for you, and, people were telling you that's not the way it should be done. And prior to this, I think you describe yourself as a modern sales leader. So what is the difference between then a modern sales leader, which is what you are now, versus maybe other sales leaders, or maybe what you were a few years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I guess every sales leader out there has their own leadership style, and I'm not saying that coach leader first, if you like, is absolutely the way to go. I think that is what AEs, for example, and probably SDRs want now. I think, in this modern day, they want a coach first to help them develop, Kyle. So that's my belief, and that's what I've transformed into. And I just think, that's the best way you can get consistent performance from your team if you're continuing to develop them. But also it will breed a self-coach culture too. So they will start to recognize before you get to them, having already sort of coached them how, on the things that we're going to start looking at, i.e. gaps in deals, things like that. Once they start to get used to that way of working, they will recognize those gaps before you recognize them and bring them to one-to-ones, etc. So you can start to make quicker ground faster. Yeah, it's. I think it's just the right way to do it, Carl. I think to get more out of your team and more out of the resource that you've got to be a coach first. And I don't think that's just in sales leadership. I'm a big football fan. If you look at the best coaches out there, your Pep Guardiolas, your Jurgen Klopps, when he was at Liverpool, they were just coaches. Day-to-day coaches, and they got more out of the team every day. And that's sort of similar philosophy that I like to follow.
You're Liverpool, aren't you?
I am.
I thought, yeah, you could
Yes.
have Arnie Slot in that at the minute as well.
I think he's very much a coach first as well. So, I mean, he's doing all right at the minute. So we'll take that for sure.
Yeah, you are doing very well, I'd say, with gritted teeth. But no, I think that's really interesting. And I think we talked about off air, maybe something that happened in your life that maybe did change your outlook and perception, and maybe almost like a bit of an epiphany when it comes to leadership as well. So, do you want to kind of share with the listeners, sorry, a bit more around the health scare that you had relatively recently?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think epiphany is a great word as well, Carl, to describe it. So, yeah, great work with that word. So, yeah, I think it was about 18 months ago now, April 2023. I felt some pain. Won't go into the deep detail, but I felt some pain in my groin, and that led to me finding out that I had a lump on one of my testicles, and then from there it kind of skyrocketed in terms of what was to come next, and that was diagnosis of testicular cancer, and this was while I was country lead at UK. So it was a total whirlwind in terms of a lot to take in, not just for me but my family as well. And I just had Ralphie, my son, not long before that, sort of 9 months before that. So I had a newborn son to try to keep my spirits up for, and my family the same. So it was tough. It was hard, but I was. I went through chemotherapy from there. Well, surgery first of all, then chemotherapy from there. So it was a definite eye opener, and just from a life and personal perspective, it just opened my eyes to having a different perspective on life. I wouldn't say I was back then. I was the healthiest. With the things like booze, not eating great, not doing as much fitness as I probably should have been. I've transformed all that. I don't really drink that often now. I have continuous breaks on it, and that's helped me to understand that your life's very precious, and you've got to treat your body very well. And that helped me to focus on that, which I hadn't before, which has really helped me. And then second thing was from a work perspective. So how I was managing the day to day. I was still at Leadoo, quite a bit of a micromanager. Was quite tough at times, demanding at times, very demanding at a lot of times, I would say. So it also opened up a perspective on how I should be probably different, and it helped me to put that into perspective, that it's just a job at the end of the day. I've just been through something like that, cancer, that is it just puts life into perspective. Life in your health's number one. Family is also there at number one spot. So from that, it just helped me to see that actually work's just work. It's just a job, and treating people with more empathy and things like that is super important. So it's a value I hold very dearly right now, and I will continue to do so. So it's definitely been an epiphany in terms of how I lead as well, and it will forever change the way I lead and also look at life. So yeah, I would say if anyone, big word of advice, Carl. I think we said it before, but people out there, check your balls continuously. Very important. I don't think a lot of people do. So I hear. And I didn't, by the way. So please do. Very important.
Love it. Yes, definitely check your balls. But I think it is important, and if people listen to this and as a result going to detect something much earlier or prevent going through what you've been through, Brett, then obviously it's definitely been worthwhile. So really appreciate you sharing your personal journey then. How are you doing now, out of interest?
Yeah, I'm on 5-year surveillance. I'm sort of nearly 2 years into that. So everything's been, touch wood, everything's been, I've had no sort of recurrence or anything like that up to now. Obviously, you get the sort of scanxiety, as they call it, because I've got to go through different scans, blood tests, reviews, etc. But it's great that I'm in the hands of the best people, and obviously they're continuing to check in on it. So all good for now, Carl. Thank you for asking.
Brilliant. Good to hear. Well, you're looking great, mate. You're sounding great. So continue the high spirits. And finally, there's loads more, to be fair, I'd love to go into that we can maybe discuss another time. I know you're big on kind of account plans, pipeline reviews, AEs following a process and scoring and all sorts of good stuff. But to kind of wrap up, really, in your opinion, what do you think we need to do to continue to change the perception of sales and make it a career and industry that more people actively choose to go into, so they're not like you working in marketing and a competition comes up and that's the thing that makes them go into it? So in your opinion, what do you think we need to do to change that perception of the industry?
Yeah, I think good question that, Kyle. Very good question. I think it's good to know, I guess, or it would be good to know what maybe stops people from going into sales. I guess that it's the maybe the targets that and the revenue targets that salespeople carry, or from an SDR perspective, pipeline generated targets, booking targets, things like that. And I think that target piece is probably the big reason. So and I think in years gone by, we all want to hit targets. Leaders, AEs, SDRs, businesses, everybody wants to hit targets. But I think leading with more empathy around those targets and understanding the different caveats, dependencies, things that need to happen from an individual perspective, management perspective, business perspective, to help people get to those targets, all need to be taken into account when reviewing how we've fared versus that performance. So I think that's a bit of it. There's a bit of a sort of stagnation around that target piece that probably stops people, Carl. But I think the modern way is definitely leading with empathy around those and making sure that it's not about if you miss target, then this is this is what bad looks like and what's going to happen then. It's about, right, how can we put an arm around that individual, around that team, to understand, right, how can we try and get them closer next time? What can we do to help them? What can we do to shift them from a development perspective? Things like that. That's very much the view I take. So I think, maybe shifting and making sure that there's a fine balance there between, we want them to hit this target, but we need some empathy as well if they don't. And how do we help them reach it? Because I think that's a big reason as to why people don't get in sales, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. I think it's a good way to look at it, to look at what prevents people from going into the industry in the first place, of which targets, pressure, the reputation, the stigma, all the things you talked about are definitely true. But Brett, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being so open, honest, candid with your journey. I've learned a thing or two, so I'm sure the people listening will be. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
No, been a pleasure too, Carl. Really appreciate you giving me some airtime. So yeah, really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.